Hey, y'all. I'm Bud Elliott, and this is Cover 3 College Football Summer School. We've done our research on the teams, and now we're bringing on the top team experts from the 24/7 Sports Network to help us fill in the blanks. Please follow us on Twitter at Cover 3 Podcast. That's Cover 3 Podcast. And leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. All right. Class is in session. Hey, y'all. Bud Elliott here, and this is College Football Summer School on the Cover 3 Podcast. And today, we're talking Little Virginia, and to help me do that, I'm going to bring in Jacquie Franciulli of Wahoos247. Jacquie, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bud.
I'm excited to talk Little UVA. It's a team that my initial kind of offseason research, I'm not real high on it, and I suspect maybe there's some areas of the team that I should be a little higher on, and maybe there's some spots where maybe there's some real cause for concern. But off a season in which they were very entertaining to watch, probably frustrating at times, but also exhilarating. 55th nationally in sort of the blending of most of the national power ratings. What's the mood there now that Bronco's out and Tony Elliott is in as the new coach?
There's an excitement around the program and a little more hype around it. So when we were at the spring game, UVA spring game will not bring in those 70,000, 50,000 people that you see in the SEC or in the Big Ten, like, for example, Penn State spring game. But they had a very decent crowd for a UVA spring game. They also had a lot of football alumni come back. They had, Anthony Harris, Daquan Romero, Terry Kirby. And that's different. The football alumni have really embraced Tony Elliott, and the fans have started to embrace Tony Elliott. And then the players have also started to kind of buy in over the course of the last weeks of spring. And I think there's a little anticipation around the program. Yes, we're going to talk about there's problems on the depth chart as far as they need numbers in certain positions. But at least mentally, there's excitement there. There's hope for the future of the UVA program because of everything that's going around behind the scenes about getting the facilities, breaking that ground in the next couple of weeks, according to Carla Williams on the spring game broadcast. So it's moving forward in that regard. So the people are excited about the direction of the program.
No doubt about it. So let's go ahead and talk offense first here. Last year, this offense was just dynamite. I'm not really sure, unless you're a bettor or somebody who really follows the ACC closely, if people realize just how good this thing was. But I had it as the 7th best offense in the country, which is pretty nuts. And Brennan Armstrong returns at QB after, I think there was some worry that he might hit the portal, I guess, or explore the pros, but he's back, which is a major win for UVA.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's unbelievable. This team was 6-6 with this type of offense. This offense was a joy to watch. Brennan Armstrong is such a different breed of quarterback when you cover him. His high school coach told me that he's actually a safety in a quarterback's position just because of his mentality. He's not scared to kind of lower down his shoulder and take a hit or give a tackle himself. And it was just a fun offense to watch. They have a plethora of wide receivers. It's unbelievable the talent they have at that position. And obviously you have Jelani Woods, who was a great tight end, a great target because he's 6'7". What a target to have if you're Brennan Armstrong. So yeah, it was a fun offense to cover, and a lot of those big skill playmakers are back. You've got Dontavian Wicks, you got Lavelle Davis, who's back after an ACL injury, who had a great breakout first year for UVA before he had his injury. You also got Keaton Thompson, who, like Brennan Armstrong, decided to come back. Armstrong said he never was tempted about entering a transfer portal. The only thing he was waiting was for the NFL guys to get back his grade. And then he decided to come back one more year. And I think that was Tony Elliott's biggest recruiting win, in all honesty, during that period, was getting him back on grounds. So they returned a lot of skill player on offense. Obviously, we're going to talk deeper about this. Obviously, the question mark is the O-line moving forward, because that O-line last year, a lot of them played at UVA for 4 or 5 years. That was an O-line that Coach 2J built from the scraps that he was given when Bronco Mendenhall arrived on grounds all those years ago. And now they're kind of starting from scratch. And that, he said he's fixing it, as he said it during spring. So that is the biggest question marks when you look at this offense moving forward. And also, if you watched the offense last year, they had no run game. Their run game was called Brennan Armstrong. He was the leading ball carrier the last 2 seasons. So that's something that Tony Elliott and company want to change as well.
For sure. Yeah. I really loved watching the offense last year. I thought just conceptually it utilized all the space on the field really well. They certainly were not good at running it. They would just sort of hand it off often enough to where you had to respect the play action just a little bit. I am curious. So all 6 offensive linemen who played over 100 snaps last year, I think, are gone. Several of them are transferred to other Power 5 programs, I believe, right? And one, I think I saw to UCF. I mean, to me, that could, in theory, create a major challenge to operate the offense anywhere close to what you did last year as far as how they ran it, because they did go with a lot of 5 and 6 man protections, trusting that offensive line to give Armstrong just enough time to get it off. Has Tony Elliott and his OC, have they discussed how this offense will operate differently?
So they were kind of saying that they wanted a more balanced offense. That was something they said. They just don't want to, fire the ball going to complete air raid like the other off. Because if you look at the offense last season, the passing game was their forte. That's what they would go after. According to Elliott and Coach Kitchings, what they want is more balanced offense, so they can be more complementary because they want to sustain drives. Last year a drive could last for a minute. They want to make sure that sometimes they give their defense a chance to recuperate of being on the field, not having them on the field as much, which at points last year, you could see they were gassed. They had other problems, don't get me wrong, but they also were on the field a lot. So they want to make sure they're more balanced approach. Now, as far as the O-line, we still have questions about the O-line because unfortunately for UVA, at points this spring, they only had 8 healthy offensive linemen. During the
including
spring,
like walk-ons?
Yes, they only had 8 healthy offensive linemen. And when they were playing during the spring game, there was a couple that played for both teams. So they were in the middle of the game. They would go out, change, put in a white penny or a blue penny, and then go back on the field. So we don't really know what the offensive line is going to look like because of all the injuries. We had a few of them like Derek Devine, Logan Taylor. Those guys didn't participate in the spring game, but those guys should be really participating in the fall as far as, 1 and 2 rotations. And obviously they're going to get, John Paul Flores. He's going to be coming in from a grand transfer from Dartmouth. He wasn't able to participate in spring. And obviously there's still the transfer portal. So we expect them to add 1 or 2 more guys on that line. But that's still a question mark, how much time you get them to gel together so they can work on timing, work on communication. So that is the big question. So what we saw too is them utilizing the tight end, Grant Mish, a little bit more as the blocker rather than a pass catcher tight end. And I think that's what you're going to see. If you looked at game film from last year, Grant Mish was such a big key to some of their success on offense. If you see some of the big runs that Brennan Armstrong was able to get to, is because of a Mish block. Or sometimes when he wanted to have a little extra time in the passing game, that was also Grant Mish. Grant Mish was a big part of why Armstrong also had some time. So I would be shocked if he's not utilized more so in that role also come the fall too. So that is the biggest thing, is the O-line as far as this offense moving forward. And I think a lot of their plans are going to rely on that. If they still don't know how many numbers. Right now they have 77 scholarship players, I want to say, in addition to the guys who are expected to arrive on summer. So they still have 8 spots available that they could play around with in the portal. And I can't imagine that they're not going to go after possibly a couple of linemen and also a tight end in that group and a running back as well.
I feel like a drop off for the offense in total is almost assured. The question is more just the size of the drop off, but then also there are 2 sides of the ball. And right. If UVA's offense drops off, if it wants to get back to a bowl game, its defense will have to play much better than last year. And last year I had them 104th. So that's pretty bad for an ACC team. Typically we only see like Duke in that territory, and that's not even every year. But I also, in my notes from last year, I had a lot of injury stars on them down the stretch. I felt like UVA lost some key guys down the stretch. And I'm curious here, there's quite a bit of turnover on the defense. And I don't mean this in a flippant way, but So they lose 5 of their top 8 by snap count on the defensive line, 3 of their top 5 by snap count on that linebacker, and 3 of their top 4 at defensive back, unless I'm mistaken there. That does seem like a lot, but on a defense that was rated 100th, does that actually matter? Like, were those guys any good? And if no, I guess why were they playing over the folks that were going to project to be better this year? You know what I'm saying? Like, they were getting the snaps, but they weren't performing.
Yes. That is a question that we've had a lot, is why we didn't see some of the young playmakers get more snap counts. And some of the guys actually did play injured last year as well. Joey Blount played injured for most of that season. So you can explain a couple of the missed tackles that he had was because he was injured for most of the year. But UVA last year's defense they just couldn't fit the new scheme that they wanted to run. Basically, the coaches decided that they wanted to switch, and they didn't have the personnel for that switch. And that's where all those problems happen. So this year, they're going to have a 3-man front. Sometimes with 4, they have a position bandit where they have an outside linebacker on the outside. They have 3 safeties most of the time lining up. So the scheme is different. And what I like about this new scheme, which Coach Rudd has also said, was it's going to be simplified. He joked that when you communicate with your wife, you don't want to overcomplicate things. You want things in a streamlined manner. And that's what he said about this defense. He wants to make sure it's communicated in a simple manner so that there's no reaction time delay, because that's what I saw last year. Sometimes I felt like guys were not in the right spot because they weren't reacting. They had to think about, where should I go? While in the spring game, you saw that like they were naturally going to that right position, which is a great thing to see on this UVA defense. The other thing is their tackling was much better. When I saw a couple of spring practices that was open to the media, that was their main focus. They had a lot of tackling drills. They went back to the basics, a lot of fundamentals. And a lot of the guys that have on this depth chart right now are guys that we had heard through the grapevine, through our sources, that were doing well in practice last fall. We knew that some of these guys just need a little bit more reps out in the field. So Jameer Carter, for instance, he's one that has really grown on the defensive line. He's done we've heard his workouts have been great. Watching him, he's got better hands than he did last year. Then Thalmui, is becoming a better leader up front as well. Sue is another guy who's coming up in the defensive line. Chico Bennett was injured last year, so he's going to be a good guy at linebacker. And when you look at that linebacker room, that was one room in particular that Coach Papinga last year for Bronco Mendenhall in the course of his career at UVA did well recruiting depth-wise. They got a lot of guys with a lot of talent. They recruited Stevie Bracey, who's going to be a first year. He actually just went through spring. They have, Mike Green, he's another guy. So what I like about this staff and what they've done is a guy like Deshaun Perry, who was kind of buried in that linebacker room because he's not a guy who's good at space. He's more of a guy who's better in the outside. They moved him to the outside. And during that spring game, we saw him get a sack and got him a quarterback hurry. So they're seeing these guys and saying, you're a versatile playmaker. Why are we going to put you in a position where obviously it doesn't fit you? We're going to move you to this position. And that's what they're playing around this spring. And I think at defensive back too, they have a couple number of athletes. Because they're playing with 3 safeties, I think they need to look at the transfer portal because I think they're going to have some depth concerns if they don't. I think the problem that this staff had is a lot of them came in so late in the process. Coach Cox, their DB coach and their passing game, defensive passing game coordinator, got in the last weekend during the recruiting contact period. He couldn't see guys. He couldn't evaluate players. So this spring evaluation period and with this guys coming in the transfer portal, that's where we're going to see more movement. But I think just looking at him, it's really hard to tell during a spring game when you only had 8 healthy offensive linemen how good this defense was compared to how poor the line was. But you can kind of grasp a little bit that you saw fundamentally that they were a little bit better. And the guys that are on this roster are talented. So it's about to see how this more simplified defense, how it's going to work come the fall. And it seems everything's trending towards the right direction, which is what you're hoping for with that offense. Like you said, might have a little bit of a drop off. So you're hoping the first 2-3 games, this defense can carry this offense for a little bit.
No doubt about it. Jacquie Franciulli, Wahoos247. Really appreciate the time today. I feel like we learned a whole lot about UVA. We'll be looking to see just how big of a jump this defense can make, what else they'll do in the transfer portal, and if Brennan Armstrong can continue to carry this offense with that plethora of receivers as they try to rebuild the O-line on the fly. I appreciate it, and we'll have you back in the fall.
Thanks for having me, Bud.
All right, that's the bell. Cover 3 College Football Summer School is over for today, but don't worry. We'll be back soon with even more episodes filling you in on the top teams in college football. Please give us those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on YouTube and on Twitter at Cover 3 Podcast, and we'll see y'all soon.